Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America.
On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, Andrew talks not just about the American past and present, but also speculates on its future. What, Andrew asks, will be the 21st century fate of this now venerable American republic?
Hello everybody. Last month we did a show with a very distinguished legal historian and scholar, Judith Resnick from Yale Law School. She has a new book out, Impermissible Punishments. It's about how prison became a problem for American democracy. It's on the systemic injustice of the American system. And of course, prison is a particular problem for American democracy when people get put in jail who aren't guilty of any crime. That's the story of our show today. My guest is Gary Tyler, who was indeed sent to jail for a very long time for a crime that he didn't commit. His new book, it's out in a few days. It's called Stitching Freedom, a true story of injustice, defiance, and hope in Angola prison. And I'm thrilled and honored that Gary Tyler is joining us from his home in Pasadena, California. Gary, welcome. Congratulations on the new book. Tell us your story, Gary. What is the narrative in Stitching Freedom?
Well, basically, it's to exemplify, despite what an individual goes through, no matter how unjustly someone is accused of something in particular, especially of murder, that if you innocent, it gives you every reason in the world to fight for that very fact of your life. And don't let anyone define you knowing that what you're accused of is not the truth. I just want people to know that I was able to overcome, insurmountable odds and fighting my case, thanks to the help of many other people as well. So I just want people to know that, when you're knocked down, you can always get up, especially when you stand on the ground of truth.
Where were you born, Gary?
I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana.
And tell me the story of the crime that you were or the perceived crime that you were accused of. What happened?
Well, October 7th, 1974, I was accused of shooting off a school bus into a white crowd that unfortunately took the life of a 13-year-old child. And in which case, when the last shot was fired, those of us on the bus was afraid that we were being shot at. You understand? That someone was shooting at us on the bus. And when the police commandeered the bus and pulled us on the side, we didn't know that anyone was shot. No more than that, we heard a shot and we felt somebody was shooting at us while we was on the bus. Until later, we found out that someone lost their life. However, the police commandeered the bus and forced everyone off the bus one by one by shaking them down and patting them. And so when they got to me, they shook me down and had me take everything out of my pockets and also my hat. And then we was put into a vacant lot. We had to jump across the ditch and get into a vacant lot. So as I jumped across the ditch, and when I turn around, that's when I see the police officer arresting my cousin, Ike, who was on the bus as well. And I asked him what was wrong. He told me that they was arresting him because he had a .22 bullet with a chain around his neck. And I told him, I said, there's nothing illegal about that. I said, excuse me, I said, say, officer, I said, Why you didn't tell me about the one I had around my neck? You didn't say there was a problem with that. That's when the officer suggested for me to come right, jump right across the ditch where he was at. As I proceeded to do that, that's when officers drew their weapons on me. And that's where commotion started, where we got into an argument. And one officer, came out and he asked me, said, what's your problem, son? And I told him that I had a father, and I see my father every day. And I guess he didn't like my response. And
so, Gary, you were 16 years old at the time, is that correct?
Yes, I just made 16.
And then the background, would it be fair to say that the background to this was a great deal of racial tension, maybe even a kind of race riot of one kind or another behind all this violence?
Well, unfortunately, we were bused in the middle of a white neighborhood where we weren't welcome. Integration wasn't welcome in the community, but we were bused at Destrehan High School, and every time there was racial strife, by us being right in the middle of the neighborhood, the whole community came out. Like they came out to, to do harm to the kids at the school. So no, it wasn't a very friendly environment. And plus, busing, it was something that was still, a very tender, touchy issue back then. Because during that time, you had a big protest in Boston, Massachusetts, with Louise Hicks, who opposed integration into the public schools there.
So all the kids on the bus were black, and all the kids demonstrating, all the people demonstrating outside were white. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And then this 13-year-old who was shot, what was her background?
No, it was a boy, a young boy that got shot.
And then how were you accused? So your quote unquote crime was in shooting this boy, is that correct?
No, I was originally arrested for disturbing the peace and interfering in the police officer's duty.
But then after that, were you accused of more than that?
After that, after being transported to the police substation and being questioned and being brutally beaten and by several police officers, I guess they beat him so bad until the parents that was there to get their children, because they arrested everybody on the bus. And they made a spectacle of everything, because the beating that they missed on me, people could hear it, and it got a lot of attention. So when they, I guess when they realized that what they've done, they felt, well, this is just why not?
So were all the police officers who were beating you, were they all white?
Yes, of course. They all was white.
And were they beating you in order to get you to admit to something that you hadn't done?
Well, it was a thing where they were trying to get me to state what I saw on the bus. They assumed that I knew something. I told them I didn't know anything. I felt like everybody else that we were being shot at. You understand? And an officer who started the beating, BJ St. Pierre, he was the one that brought me to the school and found out earlier that I was suspended, and he let me out on the school grounds. And then having to see me in the substation under arrest with everybody else, he assumed that I knew something, but he was the one that started the beating and felt that by me being on the bus that I knew something. And since I told him I didn't know anything, that's when he started the beat. I guess trying to get a confession out of me at the time.
And did you have any idea of what had happened or who had shot the weapon?
Well, the reason I found How I found out after I was arrested and stayed and put in the police patrol, that's when a young lady that went to school with me, Karen Moore, she came out and she saw me in the vehicle, and she was the one that brought to my attention that someone had gotten shot. But of course I knew, okay, I mean, it wasn't me because the police officer that was standing patrol by the vehicle, he answered another youth who came and asked while I was being arrested, and he told him that I was just arrested for disturbing the peace. You know, so that's when I found out that a young kid was shot at the school.
So then what happened?
And then I was when I was at the police station and they beat me, and one officer came in and interrupted him, told him that the beating could be heard out there in the lobby. So they all decided to move me to the back room. But in order to get me from one place to another, we had to go through the lobby where the mothers was at to get their children. And when they physically removed me, start taking me out the room, that's when I saw my mother, lock eyes with my mother. And can you imagine the mothers at that time hearing what was taking place in the back room? They knew it was a child being beaten, but they didn't know whether it was their child or not. But when they moved me from that room to the back room, that's when the mothers realized who child it was. And it was, my mother saw that it was her child. And that's when she went to, begging the police officer, can she talk to one of them? And of course they wouldn't hear it. They didn't want to hear anything that she said. One in particular interjected, I don't want to hear anything until I find out who murdered my cousin. Then they brought me in the back room, and that's when they commenced beating me in the back room.
What was the crime that you were eventually accused of?
I was eventually charged with first-degree murder.
And between October the 7th, 1974, by the way, the book is out on October the 7th, 2025. So it's almost the 50th year anniversary, 51st year anniversary of this great injustice. How long did it take for your case to go through the criminal justice system?
My case been through the criminal justice system for 41 and a half years.
Well, but I didn't mean it in that sense. How long did it take from you to go to being accused of a crime to ending up in Angola jail?
Well, they held me in the Paris jail for a year until I made 17 years old. And that's when they tried me. They tried me as an adult.
And the court made you guilty. Is that correct?
Well, I was indicted in 74 for first degree murder, and later I was tried for capital murder in 75, and automatically given the death penalty when the jury brought a first degree murder conviction.
Your case, Gary, made a lot of news, particularly through Bob Herbert of the New York Times. How typical do you, and we're going to come to what happened after you were, after this injustice, but how typical do you think this case is?
Well, historically speaking, I think that my case falls in line with a whole lot of other cases of Black men who have been falsely accused of murder or committing a crime. So it's definitely something systemic within the criminal justice system here in America, and more so in the South.
And of those many cases, I'm assuming that most of them haven't been publicized. There are still many. In your view, are there many innocent Black men in jail accused of crimes that they didn't commit? 99.9% of people in prison would say that they are innocent. And
who's to really judge whether they're innocent or guilty? You understand? But it's a thing where people that tell you that they're innocent, and later you find out that these individuals are being exonerated from DNA, DNA and various other things, that what these individuals telling you that they were innocent. You understand? And it took DNA to prove that. So it's a thing where, people tell you that they're innocent, but you'll be a fool to feel that 99% of people in prison are innocent, but there are people in prison that's innocent, that have been proven over and over and over again. Now, they may not be, you could say, innocent of committing a crime, but sometimes prosecutors overcharge an individual and charge them with a high capital case, like a first-degree murder or something like that. And if you look at the elements of the crime, it may round up to be a manslaughter. But depending on the perpetrator and the victim, where they would charge you with first-degree murder. And unfortunately, like me, I was charged with first-degree murder because I was accused of killing the 13-year-old white kid at the time.
When you look back at what you went through, Gary, particularly the trial, was one of the reasons is because you didn't have adequate legal representation? How do you must have replayed what occurred many times in your mind.
Yes.
What might have changed the narrative?
To be honest with you, I think during that time there, of course, I come from a very poor family, working family. And my mother was a housekeeper, and my father did general maintenance and work around, in the community. And whether they would have had money or not, I feel possibly the results would have been the same.
So how is it now that you're talking to me, that you're still not in jail? You could be one of those hundreds, maybe thousands, even conceivably tens of thousands of innocent people locked away who no one's ever heard of. How did your story become such a national story? How did it get picked up by Bob Herbert? And then you, of course, were your case was brought back and you were let out of jail. Why did that happen, do you think?
Well, there was very limited publicity around the case at the time when it happened. After being convicted and transported to Angola, and Angola was quite infamous with his reputation by being one of the worst, bloodiest prison in the nation back then. And when I went to prison, I met guys who was activists, who was one time, involved in the civil rights movement, who was part of SNCC, who was part of the Black Panther Party, you understand? Who was generally, people that fought for working class people. And unfortunately, they got caught up in a situation where they wound up in prison.
And just to be clear, Angola is the nickname of Louisiana State Penitentiary, which is also nicknamed the Alcatraz of the South and the Angola plantation and the farm. So it's a maximum security prison, quote unquote, farm in Louisiana.
Right. And so when I went to prison, I was this young kid, didn't know anything, afraid, having a death penalty over my head. And they had these older guys. They came, they heard about the case on the news, in the newspaper, they read. And out of concern, they wanted to know what kind of support that I had. I told them I had my family support in the church. They said, no, do you have any organizational support? Do people know your case? And of course I told them no. I mean, only, only support I have is my family and the church. So what they did, they said that you need help, because if you don't get help, most likely that they would execute you. People should know what the state of Louisiana is doing to its young kids, young Black kids in the state. So they proposed that I write a letter and that they was going to help me. And I was in 1975, because I was transported to the prison December the 15th, 1975. And after I composed the letter and they helped me, that's when they gave me organizations' addresses that I could send individual letters pleading for support from these organizations. And that's what I did. And my case came to light on a national scale by these guys helping me, you understand, reaching out to, you can say, to community organizations around the country. And that would really brought my case to national attention.
Yeah, and as you know, the Black Panthers haven't always had the best of reputations, certainly amongst conservatives. So you're suggesting that some of the inmates in Angola who were politicized or organized politically, that they were able to help you make your case and get this message of injustice out of Angola into the national press.
Right. And, and we're talking about men who had left family behind, men who had children my age, because, back then, being 17 years, we were dealing with guys that was in their 40s. You had guys that was in their 40s and 50s. And I guess when they saw me, they realized that how draconian the system became, until where now it wasn't only locking up the young, but it was willing to kill the young as well. And they looked at me that this could be my son, it could be my little brother or my nephew or my neighbor's child. So they stood up and they knew one thing, that in Angola, if I didn't have any help, most likely I would perish in that prison, because the prison was horrible, very horrible.
Yeah, and of course it does have a reputation for being particularly horrible, but the way you're describing it, Gary, there was a communal, a collaborative quality, certainly amongst some of the inmates.
Well, in the cell blocks, yes. In the cell blocks, you had those that's, who was politically active, because when I went there in the middle of a hunger strike, where the guys were protesting by the way that they were inhumanely fed, because when they came with the trays, they didn't have any food slot in the bars. They were sliding trays up under the cell doors, and on the floor you have rodents, you have roaches, you understand, and also they come through this. They shoot water and everything. That's on the floor, and the same, you say, the same slot that they slide the food tray on. No telling what you make it. You understand? It's very contaminated. So they had a protest, a hunger strike, and of course, I didn't know what, you understand, the significance of it was, but guy explained it to me. You understand? And I immediately adjourned, because I was already kind of like in a state of mind that he didn't sentence me to die. I was upset. I'm in prison for something I didn't do. So enabled me kind of like, to join the forces at that time. Of course, I didn't want to be an oddball and have the guys upset with me, because I was in a place that I didn't know anybody.
Gary, as I said, Bob Herbert of the New York Times picked up your case. Also, human rights organizations like Amnesty International. How did it feel to you as, again, quote unquote, an American, to get represented by a group like Amnesty International? When you were growing up in Louisiana, what was your sense of what it meant to be an American, or was it all thought out in racial terms?
Well, one thing about education tends to shine the light on a lot of things, and here in America, you're told that you are an American, it's a democratic country, and that you are treated equal. You understand that you have the right to, to be whoever you want to be. But when realizing that, no, that is not the case, not here in America. Who democracy for who? Equality for who? You understand? That if it took the civil rights movement for Black people to gain the right to vote, look at what's happening today in a democratic America. They're stripping that away from people. You understand? Until where, they feel that people shouldn't vote. So who they targeting that against? I mean, even other people, they targeting other groups of people as well. So, when you realize that, hey, wait a minute, something is wrong with this system, the way they treat people, especially the way they treated you, you start feeling ill will about a system that you at one time held up, thought highly of.
And yet, I'm certainly not here to defend the system, Gary, but in the end, this was clearly a manifestation of injustice, but was justice done? How long did you stay in Angola?
I stayed in Angola 41 and a half years.
So you were let out. So you were...
Listen, but let me say this. 41 and a half years, I went through the process of appeal. You understand? All the way to the United States Supreme Court. Only one justice, Thurgood Marshall, realized that and felt that something was seriously wrong with the case, but he was the only justice agreed to hear my case. But of course, it takes more than just one to hear your case. And I had I had a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal overturned my conviction because they felt that I received a fundamentally unfair trial and was denied due process of law. You understand? And that my constitutional rights was violated. But later, through an en banc appeal, they heard the case and they overturned the three justices' decision in my case and reinstated my conviction when I was sentenced to life in prison. And then I had 3 pardon board recommendations, favorable pardon board recommendations, that the people on the board felt that something was seriously wrong with this case. But of course, by my case being a political football at that time, the governor would not touch it. Governor Edwards would not touch it, as well as Governor Roma. They would not touch the case at all because they felt that it was a career-ending move if they did anything to pardon me.
Gary, you don't need me to tell you this. 41 and a half years is a lifetime. The subtitle,
it is.
Yeah, the subtitle of your book is A True Story of Injustice, Defiance, and Hope in Angola Prison. I get the injustice, I get the defiance and the hope, but what about the anger?
Of course, I was angry. I was upset.
You had your life stolen from you.
Yes, and I felt wrong, and I was in a place where it literally was destroying men. All right, and I realized that I was falling within that. You understand? Within that state of mind that I was being bitter, like most men in prison. I had an anger issue. You understand? But then when you see what's going on around you, you're forced to make a decision. Do you want to continue to go on the way you are going, or do you want to change? Because if you want to survive this ordeal, then you have to start to make some internalized change within yourself. You understand? I realized that I lacked discipline. And thanks to the men that was around me, they helped point these things out. And they're the one that told me that my emotions were to serve me and not to govern me. You understand? And that I need to take advantage of a bad situation by educating myself, being aware about how the system functioned and how inadequate the criminal justice system was. So, and by helping me, it helped me to be able to temper my, my attitude and my anger. And when I realized one thing, what was the icing on the cake, that I had to learn how to forgive.
It's interesting that Gary, sometimes these narratives, we've done a number of shows on similar themes. Sometimes they come with a religious narrative of discovering or rediscovering God. Is there a religious quality, particularly the idea of forgiveness, or is that more secular, political?
I would say secular politically. Because I became disillusioned with Christianity because I was raised in a Christian community, in a household. I was baptized. One time I aspired to be a preacher myself. But after going through what I went through, I became disillusioned. You understand? And I realized how people were being murdered in the name of Jesus Christ, in the name of Christianity. And I say that, wait a minute, if there was a just God, why God allowed this to happen to me? Why allow things to happen to other people? You understand? So I became a seeker. So what I did, I left from that, you understand? And then I pursued to try to be a Muslim. But I realized that wasn't my suit as well. You understand? Because, if I'm looking at what happened to me and how I was unjustly accused and convicted for something I didn't do, then I'm an individual that's against oppression. I'm an individual that is against wrong. People being politically persecuted, people being persecuted because of who they are or whatever. Secular, no, if I felt that, why should I adhere to any religious perspective when I can be spiritually inclined? You understand? So no, I wasn't, my change of forgiveness wasn't based upon any religious connotation. No, it wasn't that at all.
What about the racial component? You were clearly a victim of racial injustice. Did your experience, the 41 years in Angola, did it compound your sense of America being one either of blacks and whites? Were there white prisoners in Angola who were sympathetic? Or was this essentially a segregated prison? Or your experience in Angola was segregated?
Only one that was sympathetic was the ones that had the death penalty to themselves, that was on death row with me. And some white guys who that the prison system considered incorrigible, that these guys was a threat to security in prison, that they locked up in CCR. You understand? The other one just kind of like looked at it and said, man, you shouldn't be here, man. What they did to you wrong. I understand your situation. But even though back then, I can say that the prison itself was about 71 to 75% black, while the other half was about 24 to 25% white. It was predominantly a black prison with a predominantly white staff, prison guard staff.
You spent 41 and a half years in Angola. As you said, when you got there, you were educated, if that's the right word, by older, more experienced prisoners. Did you become one of those wise elders? Did you ever see a Gary Tyler come in, 17, 18-year-old kid, the victim of injustice? Did you mature? I mean, you obviously matured in terms of your age, but did those 41 and a half years, did that create a prison leader, so to speak?
Well, I would say that my actions spoke for itself, that what those guys instilled in me by educating me, that they was giving me the best of themselves. They was giving me something that they felt that they didn't have a chance to be able to share and try to help other people change their lives. Because as I mentioned, I was dealing with guys that had families that they left behind. They didn't have a chance to raise their children, especially their sons. I guess that's one of the reasons why they poured their hearts out to me to help me. All right. Now, when I was released from maximum security for almost being in the cells for 10 years, they equipped me with the knowledge to survive and to make change. So when I went to the main prison, I just only implemented what the guys taught me, and it was quite effective to where I became the, you could say, the president of the drama club. I was the president of the Galva Club, which later became Toastmasters International. All right, and I was active within organization activity as well as prison activities themselves. So I guess that I was able to set an example for other people, that people followed me.
You were released in 2016, but you were never exonerated. Is your case an example of injustice, or did the system somehow, in some ways at least, reprieve itself in your eyes?
I won't necessarily say that it reprieved itself. I think under the circumstances, thanks to you can say Brian Stevenson and attorneys that worked with him, that recognized that we were dealing with a criminal justice system that criminally was unfair to young people, juveniles, because statistically, young people serve more time in prison than adult offenders. I was in prison for 4 decades, and I witnessed guys who've been to prison 2, 3, sometimes 4 times, back and forth. Recidivism was quite high when it came down to understand people who have been, you could say, been convicted of other offenses. All right. Now, I mainly benefited from the decision that Miller versus Alabama, when the United States Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional to deprive a young person of any meaningful possibility of ever getting out of prison. And that's what really cracked the door open for me. And I think that sympathetically, you had those in position that felt that, okay, I mean, we're talking about young people, our kids, people that haven't been given a chance in life and been judged, by the act that they committed, and we don't condemn them for the rest of their lives, that we should at least consider giving those guys or those young ladies at the time, you could say, a chance. And that's one of the reasons that I was able to get out, because of that crack in the door.
So you did finally get out. You spent 41 and a half years. You went in 1974. You came out in around 2015.
Yeah.
The America that you came out, when you blinked your eyes in the face of the sun, was it different? And what was were you surprised with what you saw?
I tell people, I felt like I know what Rip Van Winkle went through after sleeping 100 years. When he woke up, they had planes, they had cars, they had trains, they had all of that. And when I got out, they had cell phones. They had little small devices that you can talk to. I was used to having that when you had to make a phone call. You usually had to make a phone call at a phone booth or at your house. They had computers. When I was out there, they had typewriters. Now they got computers, small computers you can walk around with. I mean, it was surreal how society have changed so much. And and you talking about adjusting. I had to start off like an infant, learning how to feed himself, learning how to walk. And that's how it been for me when I was released in prison, and I'm still adjusting.
Why did you move to Pasadena? Why didn't you go back to Louisiana, where you grew up?
Well, I used to live in Los Angeles back in the 70s.
Okay.
Right, and I felt that in order to give myself a chance and opportunity to live, to understand that I have to change my scenery. I had to change where I live, because I've been in the prison for 40 decades, but even though I was in the state of Louisiana, I felt that the opportunities for me to grow wasn't there in the state. So it was in my best interest that I left.
Your book is called Stitching Freedom, and it refers to the quilting that you discovered in jail. You've become an artist now. You had your first solo exhibit quite recently, back in 2023.
Yes.
How has quilting educated you? My wife is a quilter, so I'm quite familiar with certainly the art and I don't know what you would call it, the political or the cultural ramifications of quilting. Why does it mean so much to you? And why did you call this book Stitching Freedom?
After everything I went through, my life had been torn apart. It had been ripped, all right? And how could you put your life together after being pulled every which way, not given opportunity to live your life? And I feel that everything that I lived and experienced in Angola, especially having to spend many years, almost a decade in the cell blocks, and then getting out, working with other guys, you understand, and becoming president of an organization and help establishing organizations, and then become a hospice volunteer. I think that was kind of like the pinnacle of my life, that here, despite everything I went through, that I was willing to take care of men who was terminally ill, men that after a certain amount of time that they would die, we'll never see those guys again, especially men who played an intricate part in who I am today, that selected me as their volunteer. And then tell me on their dying bed how proud they were of me. You understand? And that, that meant a lot. That was a sense of redemption for them. And as I reflect on my life, it was a thing that, how can I tell my story? You understand? How can I tell my story, show people that the life I live, because they only know what they read about me, but they really didn't know the life that I lived. And I felt it was imperative that I share my life with them by piecing my life together. And that's why I felt that, when I got into quilting, I didn't want to do that, believe me, because I felt that wasn't a thing for a man to do. It was a feminine thing. So I had this macho ego at the time. But when it came down to, hey, we doing this for the guys. We doing this for the guys to raise funds. We doing this because when the guy expired, that the quilt would be passed on to his family. You understand? So I was sold on that. And I felt that you're right. We need to do that. But at the same time, it was a sense of healing for me, patching my life together, because I'm doing something that is, that is humane. I'm doing something that is caring for other men. So I felt that, that the title of the book, it exemplifies my life and what I went through.
Yeah, so piecing or patching your life together is both literal and metaphorical in the book, in your life and in your relationship to quilting. Finally, Gary, it's 10 years almost since you got out. You've had quite a life, a remarkable life, both inside and outside prison. You talked earlier about African Americans having their voting rights taken away from them. What's your take on America in the mid-20s? You went through Black Lives Matter. You were, of course, in jail when America had its first African American president. Is America in danger of reverting back to the mid-70s when you went to jail in Louisiana? Or are you more optimistic and positive about things in this country now?
One thing I learned about struggle is that it's constant. You never stop, because you win something don't necessarily mean that you should become complacent and that's the end of your struggle. No, I am optimistic, because I feel that if I was able to endure 4 decades of what I've been through in prison life, that coming out here in society, what's the sense of me being pessimistic for? When I was optimistic in prison, I didn't give up. I felt that long as we have the ability to be able to speak up, long as we're able to organize, long as we're able to, you understand, work with others, it is our job. It is our, it is our destiny to make sure that despite forces that try to take the rights away from people who was rightfully earned, it is our, you understand, it is our duty to fight against that, to keep that from happening. So no, I'm not pessimistic. To me, it's part of adversity that drives us to just stand to strive, to do better. You understand? Instead of just passing laws, let's codify these laws, make sure that these laws will never be challenged or taken away from people ever again. We just shouldn't take life for granted. We should always know that, you understand, each and every battle is rightfully, you understand, fought for and earned, and that we should always stay on guard that, that you can lose at any given time.
Well, that's the story of Gary Tyler. A remarkable life, remarkable story, author of Stitching Freedom, major new book, a true story of injustice, defiance, and hope in Angola prison. Gary, real honor to have you on the show. Keep quilting. We need guys like you to be piecing and patching not just your lives, but maybe the collective life of America together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrews. I appreciate it a lot.